Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are breaking down three incredibly powerful yet distinct frameworks for making classrooms truly equitable for all students. We're going to be unpacking Carol Ann Tomlinson's differentiated instruction, universal design for learning, and Patricia Lombardi's inclusive pedagogy. Or, as I actually like to think of them to keep things straight, the detective, the architect, and the specialist. But first, let's just kick things off with a fundamental question. Is there even such a thing as an average learner? Well, cognitive psychology and modern educational research loudly tell us, no way. The average learner is a complete myth. Literally, every single student walks into a classroom with a totally unique mix of background knowledge, lived experiences, memory capacity, language skills, and motivations. And because learners differ so drastically, all three of the frameworks we're exploring today share one massive foundational agreement. They completely reject the whole standardized one-size-fits-all approach to teaching. They all firmly agree that we need equity, not uniformity. But, and here is the focus for our explainer today, where things get really fascinating, they fiercely disagree on exactly how to achieve that equity. And even more importantly, they disagree on where the problem actually starts in the first place. So, here is our roadmap for today. 1. 3 approaches to inclusion. 2. Locating the learning barrier. 3. Timing, focus, and diagnosis. And finally, 4. A layered combined model. Okay, let's jump right into section 1, 3 approaches to inclusion. First up, we have Carol Ann Tomlinson's differentiated instruction. For this one, I want you to think of Tomlinson as our detective. Her whole model relies heavily on responsive teaching. Basically, the teacher is constantly gathering clues during instruction through formative assessment to figure out exactly where a student is at that exact moment. Asking questions like, are they ready for more of a challenge right now? Do they maybe need a slightly different pace? And based on those clues, the teacher acts as a detective, adjusting on the fly, and providing flexible routes through the material. Now, if Tomlinson is the detective, Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, acts a whole lot more like an architect. This framework actually grew directly out of the architectural concept of universal design. Think about creating a building that is accessible to absolutely everyone right from the start, rather than retrofitting it later. So instead of reacting to students mid-lesson, our architect builds flexibility directly into the educational blueprint. They anticipate that learners will vary, so they proactively design multiple options for engagement, representation, and expression into the curriculum from day one. And bringing it home, we have Patricia Lombardi's inclusive pedagogy. Emerging straight out of the special education tradition, Lombardi acts like a specialist. Her approach is highly practical. It's all about bringing targeted supports, specific instructional adaptations, and assistive technologies directly into the inclusive classroom setting. She focuses heavily on providing very specific accommodations for learners with formally identified disabilities, making sure they have meaningful, individualized access to the shared learning environment. All right, moving on to section 2, locating the learning barrier. Okay, consider this quote for a second. A staircase may disable a wheelchair user, while a ramp or lift increases access. This brilliantly illustrates UDL's foundation in the social model of disability. UDL insists that difficulties actually arise from the design of the environment itself, not from the individual person. So, an individual student isn't disabled by a complex text. They're disabled by a curriculum that only offers that information in a rigid, printed format. UDL totally flips the script here, asking, what is wrong with the curriculum, not what is wrong with the learner? The differences between these 3 approaches become crystal clear when we ask where they believe the barrier actually lives. UDL blames inflexible teaching materials and the curriculum itself. Tomlinson, on the other hand, says the barrier lives in the relationship between the learner's readiness and the instruction. To her, it's a mismatch that the teacher needs to fix in real time. And Lombardi kind of bridges both worlds. Where UDL fixes the environment and Tomlinson fixes the instructional match, Lombardi zeroes in on adapting the specific interaction for an individual student based on their unique documented support needs. That takes us to section 3, timing, focus, and diagnosis. So this core difference in who or what gets the blame dictates a massive contrast in the timing of how teachers should intervene. UDL is exclusively proactive. Because it blames the environment, it tries to fix that environment before teaching even starts for the entire diverse population. Tomlinson is proactive, sure, but she is heavily responsive. She plans flexible pathways, but then relies on adapting on the fly for temporary groups. And Lombardi is both proactive and reactive, heavily relying on diagnosing individual needs. While formal diagnosis really isn't central to UDL or Tomlinson at all, it is the absolute beating heart of Lombardi's specialist approach. And because Lombardi is so deeply rooted in special education, her model draws a very strict line between accommodations and modifications. This is crucial. An accommodation changes how a student accesses instruction, like giving a student extra time on a test. The core learning goal stays exactly the same. A modification, though, changes what the student is expected to learn, like actually reducing the complexity of the learning standard itself. Lombardi urges us to be incredibly precise here, because if you apply inappropriate modifications, you can accidentally rob a student of the opportunity to learn the material entirely. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 4, a layered combined model. Because we've highlighted so many differences, you might be thinking these models are fundamentally competing with each other. But actually, they stack together beautifully into a highly comprehensive classroom strategy. Here's how it looks in practice. Step 1, universal design. You act as the architect, proactively providing varied written, visual, and audio sources from day one. Step 2, responsive differentiation. Now you become the detective, using formative assessment to dial the complexity of those sources up or down on the fly depending on how the class is doing. And Step 3, individualized support. You bring in the specialist, perhaps providing text-to-speech software or a legally recognized accommodation for one specific student, just as Lombardi suggests. As we finish up this explainer, I want to leave you with one big, provocative question to reflect on for your own practice. Are you actually redesigning the learning environment, or are you just reacting to it? True inclusion really requires both. It requires the proactive vision of the architect, the on-the-fly agility of the detective, and the highly targeted interventions of the specialist. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.